The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by USA Today. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Your reader today is Alan Blackburn, and it's today in memory of Barbara Blackburn, my wife, who passed away in November. She read in this time slot for many years. Bitter cold, ice, are expected to persist. Authorities report at least 13 deaths over the weekend as frigid temperatures expanded over the eastern two-thirds of the nation. And the extreme cold isn't going away soon for a swath of the United States, from Texas to New England. The monster storm dumped sleet, freezing rain, and snow over much of the country, disrupting travel and leaving hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses without power in the eastern and southern states. And now widespread sub-zero temperatures and wind chills are expected to disrupt millions of Americans in early February, triggering concerns for people without power or shelter. Bitterly cold temperatures and dangerously cold wind chills were expected from the southern plains to the northeast through the week, causing prolonged hazards in travel and infrastructure impacts. The cold will hamper cleanup efforts, prolong infrastructure impacts, and maintain hazardous travel for several days, said the National Weather Service. Catastrophic effects from ice will cause extended power outages. More than 750,000 homes and businesses remained without power the morning of January 26th after 1 million outages reported the day before. The most blackouts were reported in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana. January 25th saw the largest number of flight cancellations across the nation since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. More than 10,900 flights were canceled and 3,400 delayed. And the flight tracking website FlightAware said more than 37 flights into or within and out of the country were canceled the morning of January 26th. Major cities across the Northeast recorded more than a foot of snow, and more was expected, including 15 inches in Boston. Metro Columbus, Ohio also saw a foot of snow, and Cincinnati set a record January 25th with 9.2 inches. Much of the South remained hunkered down. At least 4 states, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, closed all state offices. Swaths of schools were closed or moved to remote learning, including schools in New York City, Houston, Dallas, Nashville, and the Atlanta metropolitan area. 2 men in northwest Louisiana died of hypothermia, the Louisiana Department of Health confirmed, and at least 5 people died outdoors in New York City. The cause of the deaths remained under investigation. Austin Mayor Kirk Watson posted on X that 1 person had died of exposure-related causes. A major crash shut down Interstate 10 in Kimball County, Texas for several hours late on January 24th. 1 person was killed and 8 were injured in the accident. Late Lieutenant Bill Miller of the Tennessee Highway Patrol reported that as of January 24th, troopers had responded to more than 160 motor assists and more than 50 crashes, which resulted in 18 injuries and 1 death. In central Arkansas, a 17-year-old boy died in a sledding accident. The Saline County Sheriff's Office confirmed the teen was being pulled by an ATV when he struck a tree and was critically injured. The body of a missing University of Michigan student identified as 19-year-old Lucas Matson was recovered January 24th after a nearly 20-hour search by authorities in extreme cold conditions, said the Ann Arbor Police Department. Matson was last seen around 1 a.m. local time January 23rd walking alone outside without a coat. Police said the cause of his death has not yet been determined, but police said there were no obvious signs of trauma and foul play was not suspected. The body of a Kansas woman who was last seen late January 23rd was found in a wooded area in Emporia, the Emporia Police Department said. Police believe Rebecca Rauber, who was 28 years old, may have succumbed to hypothermia early on in her disappearance as she was covered in snow. The Weather Service warned that the risk was far from over. Cold temperatures and wind chills will bring a life-threatening risk of hypothermia and frostbite, which could be heightened by prolonged power outages. The Weather Service said the coldest wind chills will be in the parts of the plains, lower Mississippi Valley, Ohio Valley, and the Mid-Atlantic. Forecasters noted the dangerous wind chills as low as 50 below zero and below normal temperatures could continue into early February. Tenuous trust between Minneapolis residents and officers is on the brink. Booming flashbangs and fireworks rattled the frigid windows of Michelle Gross's home in North Minneapolis. It sounded like a war zone outside, Gross said about the confrontation between federal agents throwing grenades and protesters lighting firecrackers on January 14th after a man was shot. I really feel like our federal government is out to get us. I never, ever thought I would say anything like this. Gross, who's 68 years old and the longtime leader of the nonprofit Communities United Against Police Brutality, said she had seen some changes with the Minneapolis Police Department in the community 6 years after the murder of George Floyd. But now she said that burgeoning goodwill will evaporate unless she sees police stand up to ICE and other federal authorities. I think the Minneapolis Police Department is definitely in need of rehabilitating reputation. Could be heroes if they stand up to the feds, Gross said. Some people feel they are either letting ICE attack the community by standing by or they are helping them. Tensions may only intensify after the ICU nurse Alex Preddy of Minneapolis was shot and killed by Border Police officers on January 24th. The Department of Homeland Security said Preddy, a licensed gun owner, had a handgun, in Port's Border Patrol offices during a targeted operation. He violently resisted when officers tried to disarm him, and an agent shot him in self-defense, the DHS said. Videos of the scene did not show Pettit drawing his gun at any point. I think it is horrific. What we have is an assault by the government on our community, Gross said hours after the January 24th shooting. I'm outraged beyond belief. Reactions also came swiftly from city and state leaders as Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and Governor Tim Walz urged President Donald Trump to end the operation known as Operation Metro Surge. How many more residents, how many more Americans need to die or get badly hurt for this operation to end, Frey said at a news conference after watching videos of the shooting. How many more lives need to be lost before this administration realizes that a political and partisan narrative is not as important as American values? How many times must local and national leaders plead with you, Donald Trump, to end this operation and recognize this is not creating safety in our city, Frey continued. He said that he's tired of hearing that the local leaders in the community are impeding the federal officers' operation, which he says are false narratives. This is what weakens our country. This is what erodes trust in both law enforcement and democracy itself, Frey said. In response, Trump asked in Truth Social why local police did not protect ICE officers. The mayor and the governor called them off. It stated many of the police were not allowed to do their job, that ICE had to protect themselves. Not an easy thing to do, Trump said. Trump also accused Frey and Walz of inciting violence. The mayor and the governor are inciting insurrection with their pompous, dangerous, and arrogant rhetoric, Pomp said. Instead, these sanctimonious political fools should be looking for billions of dollars that have been stolen from the people of Minnesota and the United States of America. Let our ICE patriots do their job. Confrontations between the public and federal officers across the country put local police in a difficult spot. If they side with immigration officers, they will alienate area residents who they need as crime-fighting allies. If they side with local residents, they put themselves at odds with larger, better-armed federal forces. Courts may eventually resolve some of the power imbalance, but in the meantime, local police have a tightrope to walk. I get with local law enforcement that they have their hands are somewhat tied. They don't want to be caught up in this, but at the same time, they don't want to close the door to at least having effective communication with the federal agents and ICE and CBP agents that are working in their jurisdiction, said Jill Snyder, retired New York Police Department officer and a resident senior fellow at R Street Institute of Public Policy. As tensions remain high in Minneapolis, Snyder says she's worried about other ICE operations, including Portland, Oregon. More than 1,100 immigration arrests have been made since January 2025, and 2 protesters were shot by federal officers in 2026. Her concerns also extend to the state of Maine, where federal office officials said they made more than 100 arrests in the first 3 days, what they called Operation Catch of the Day. In both states, local law enforcement is not cooperating with federal officers. In Maine, a new law limiting police involvement in immigration enforcement took effect months earlier than anticipated, after Governor Janet Mills allowed the measure to become law in December. It seems clear the relationship between local law enforcement and the Justice Department has become adversarial, and these tensions seem like they've been intentionally created and inflamed by the federal government, said Stacey Young, a former 18-year employee of the Department of Justice, who serves as senior attorney in Civil Rights Division. Regular citizens likely don't understand the difference between local police and federal officials, painting them both with the same brush. Many federal officers in Minneapolis are also wearing jackets loudly labeled police, which could add to the confusion. Snyder worries that if the agencies are operating in silos or across purposes, it could cause more harm than good, especially for local police officers. Your eyes don't lie. Video anger and a possible turning point. In an era of smartphones, there are times people don't have to believe federal authorities or journalists or anyone else. They can watch what happened themselves. A half dozen citizen videos that chronicle the shooting of Alex Preddy on a freezing street in Minneapolis on January 24th may well turn out to be a pivot point for President Donald Trump. The deployment of thousands of ICE and Border Patrol agents on the streets of U.S. cities, and the debate over constitutional right to protest and more. Shot from various angles, some shaky and just seconds long, they can be stitched together to depict an unfolding of events at direct odds with the account by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and other top administration officials. Your eyes don't lie, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat, said on NBC's Meet the Press. The contrast between what Noem claimed and what millions of Americans watched means the past weekend could turn out to be a crucial passage that pressures the president to adjust course or pay a political price, emboldening congressional opponents to confront him. Already the repercussions are threatening a fragile agreement for the Senate to approve a bipartisan spending package that happens to include $10 billion for ICE. I can't vote for any bill that includes ICE funding unless under these circumstances, said Senator Agnes King, an independent from Maine, on CBS Face the Nation, though that could mean a partial government shutdown on Friday. Even Representative James Comer, a staunch Republican from Kentucky who chairs the House Oversight Committee, suggested on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures that Trump remove ICE agents from Minneapolis and send them elsewhere if there's a chance of losing more innocent lives or whatever. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana called in a statement for a full joint and federal and state investigation into the shooting. And there were protests on the streets, not only in Minneapolis, but also in cities from New York to Chicago to Los Angeles. In November, there could be consequences as well for Republican congressional candidates in swing districts. The midterm elections often serve as a referendum on the White House, and they set the stage for the final 2 years of the president's term. And here's what Noem said at a news conference hours after the shooting. She said, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. She told reporters, the officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. She said it looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage and kill law enforcement. But that's not what it looked like to many other Americans. The videos show Preddy, who's 37 and an ICU nurse for the Minneapolis VA healthcare system, brandishing not a gun, but a cell phone, recording the scene of a protest and trying to help a woman who had fallen after being sprayed with a chemical agent. He went face-to-face with the Border Patrol agent, who was forced to his knees, then flat on the ground, surrounded by armed men in tactical gear. It was only then they seemed to discover he had a gun, which turned out to be registered and legal to carry. Frame-by-frame scrutiny indicates the weapon had been confiscated by an agent seconds before the first 10 shots were fired at Preddy. He died before the first doctor arrived on the scene. Americans are inclined to endorse Trump's tightening of the U.S. border with Mexico and his promise to deport violent criminals who are in the country illegally. From the start of his political career, illegal immigration has been one of the animating issues for his supporters and a source of strength in assessments of presidency. But even before the shooting of President Preddy, nearly two-thirds of Americans disapproved of the way ICE was handling its job. 6 in 10 said in a New York Times Siena University survey that the agency had gone too far in its tactics, including 70% of independent voters who typically determine elections. Earlier in January in Minneapolis, Renee Nicole Good, who had been shot and killed by an ICE agent who fired into her car, and another confrontation caught on smartphones. Other videos that have gone viral show a 5-year-old boy in a winter hat with bunny ears being detained by an agent. Another depicted an elderly man, a little more than his underwear, being pulled out of his home and placed in a government SUV. Well, You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:15. Move on to page 6 here. Federal meeting comes amid legal uncertainty. Interest rates predicted to remain unchanged. Although the Federal Reserve is expected to leave interest rates unchanged at the conclusion of its two-day meeting on January 28th, a cloud of political and legal uncertainty is looming over the central bank. The Fed cut rates at its past three meetings, bringing the federal bonds rate to a range of 3.5% to 3.75%. Economists say with inflation and the labor market little change since policymakers last met in December, and with some committee members suggested the policy is near neutral, there's little expectation of another rate cut this month. The focus is going to be on the commentary, said Liz Thomas, head of investment strategy at SoFi. Thomas said she'd be listening for whether Chair Jerome Powell signals the Fed is as concerned about the labor market as it was last year, how officials are assessing inflation risk as the legal battle over tariffs continues, and whether Powell addresses recent geopolitical developments regarding Venezuela and Greenland. The meeting will also mark the first since the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case involving Governor Lisa Cook, since Powell confirmed he was under investigation by the Department of Justice. Both developments have raised concerns about the central bank's independence from politics. With Powell's term as chair set to end in May, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said President Donald Trump's nomination for the next chair is coming soon, prompting questions about the Fed's future leadership. Will the Fed cut interest rates? Following the December meeting, the Fed's dot plot, a chart depicting where policymakers expect rates to be in the future, suggested the bar for additional rate cuts would be higher moving forward. The Fed has a dual mandate of keeping unemployment low and prices stable. Though at its last meeting, officials were working with limited recent government data on the job market and inflation because last year's federal government shutdown disrupted the release of key reports. At the time, the most recent available government data showed unemployment rate ticked up at an annual inflation rate was 3% in September. This time, policymakers have data for November and December. The Consumer Price Index showed an annual inflation rate was 2.7% in both months, and the December jobs report revealed unemployment rate had fallen slightly after hitting a four-year high in November. We're getting pretty close to neutral right now, said KBRA chief strategist, adding he doesn't expect a rate cut at a January meeting, but we do expect some language that speaks to the economy coming into a better balance. Hasser said economists are still closely tracking the path of inflation, which remains above the Fed's 2% target, particularly as the U.S. economy is set to receive a boost in the first quarter of 2026. Those, he said, include tax refunds stemming from recent legislation, infrastructure spending, and the delayed effects of the Fed's last three rate cuts filtering through the economy. Between the expected stimulus and the Fed's assessment that the policy is near neutral, there is no hurry to act, according to Bank of America Global Research Report. Oxford Economics and Wells Fargo economists seem to agree. It would take a decisive weakening in the labor market conditions for the Fed to deliver sooner and more aggressive rate cuts, which we think is unlikely. Wells Fargo economists forecast 2 quarter-point cuts in March and June, but said the risk to our forecast looks increasingly skewed toward later, possibly less easing this year. Islands bought by the U.S. have a message for Greenland. Some say they're rewatching their own past. Traces of Denmark's 250-year imperial reign are still visible in St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John, and the smattering of tiny islets that today make up the U.S. Virgin Islands. Cities and street signs hold Danish names like Frederiksted. Buildings feature yellowish-red bricks brought on boats across the Atlantic, and the stone facades of sugar plantations where enslaved Africans were forced to labor still stand. They're interspersed with evidence of the island's vibrant Caribbean culture, from colorfully costumed dancers to drum-driven melodies, and McDonald's and Home Depot stores that reflect its now century-long status as an unincorporated territory of the United States. As President Donald Trump negotiates a framework of a future deal with Denmark for access to Greenland, some residents of the tropical territory say they feel like they're rewatching their own past. History never repeats itself in the same way, but it shows up in a different form. said Stephanie Brown, an Afro-Caribbean visual historian with deep roots in the Virgin Islands. Brown said her ancestors were among the first enslaved by Danish colonial powers, and she's now among a cohort of people working to secure reparations from Denmark. As slaves, then as residents in Danish turned United States territory, Brown said her relatives were sold without their consent. A century later, she worries that residents of Greenland are facing the same threat her ancestor did, not having a seat at the table over decisions on the future of their own lands. I understand it because the same thing happened to my relatives. I don't want to see it happen to another place. More than a century ago, President Woodrow Wilson bought the islands, then called the Danish West Indies, from Denmark for $25 million, after threatening to take them by force. At the time, a war was raging in Europe, and the United States was seeking to assert its dominance in Latin America, using many of the same arguments Trump has in jockeying for control of Greenland. Wilson said he wanted the islands for strategic reasons, to secure new trade routes and prevent adversaries from dominating the region. The nation's rival then wasn't China or Russia, but Germany, and the aggressor in World War I. And the war heightened fears that Germany would absorb Denmark and its territories, a preserved threat to the United States. After the 1917 purchase, the island served for decades as a strategic Caribbean outpost for the United States military and a hub of naval operations. But the Navy Air Station on the territory closed in 1948, and the islands never became the significant military asset once envisioned. The roughly 26,000 inhabitants scattered across St. John, St. Croix, and St. Thomas in 1917 were not given a say in their acquisition, though Denmark did hold a referendum for its mainland residents. After the transaction, it took more than a decade for Virgin Islanders to gain United States citizenship. Islanders were given the right to vote for their own governor in 1970. Today, like residents of other U.S. territories, citizens of the Virgin Islands cannot vote for president and do not have a voting representative in Congress. Philippe Ayala, a member of St. Thomas Historical Trust, said he heard conversations about Trump's Greenland desires, but mostly in private circles. People that are more focused on the international actions happening right in their backyard. Two Navy aircraft carriers, the Ford and the Iwo Jima, docked in U.S. Virgin Islands in December to aid in the Trump administration's efforts to disrupt drug trafficking and later to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The ships marked the first major Navy presence on the islands in decades. Some residents welcomed the ships, and they say it has brought as a welcome economic boost for the islands. Others were frightened. When we stop off our porches, most of the houses overlook the harbor and the bay. To see aircraft carriers and knowing the political climate of the region, it took us a little off guard. In the aftermath of his military actions in Venezuela, Trump ratcheted up calls to annex Greenland and refused to rule out doing so through military force. Gun rights groups slammed the feds after the Minnesota shooting. Several prominent Second American rights groups have blasted federal officials for suggesting it's dangerous and possibly an indication of malintent for lawful gun owners to protest while in possession of their legally obtained firearms. The controversy came after a Border Patrol agent on January 24 shot and killed Alex Petty, a U.S. citizen and registered Veterans Affairs nurse in Minneapolis. Federal officials said Petty had a gun and intended to kill law enforcement. But videos and eyewitness accounts in federal court show Petty holding a phone, not brandishing a firearm. Hours after the fatal shooting, Assistant Attorney U.S. Bill Asaley in Southern California took to X and said, if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there's a high likelihood they'll be legally justified in shooting you. Don't do it. Other members of the Trump administration argue that peaceful protesters don't show up with guns. But several prominent gun rights groups took issue with Asaley's statement, including the National Rifle Association. This sentiment from the First Assistant U.S. Attorney for Central District, California is dangerous and wrong, the NRA said on X. Responsible public voices should be awaiting a full investigation, not making generalization and demonizing law-abiding citizens. Gun Owners for America said in a statement that its leaders condemned the untoward comments by Asaley. Federal agencies are not highly likely to be legalized justifying shooting concealed carry licenses who approach while lawfully carrying a firearm, the group said. The Second Amendment protects Americans' right to bear arms while protesting, a right the federal government must not infringe upon. U.S. Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, also blasted his comments. Writing on X, carrying a firearm is not a death sentence. It's a constitutionally protected God-given right. And if you don't understand this, you have no business in law enforcement or government. The salient follow-up statement accused critics of mischaracterizing his comments. I never said it's legally justified to shoot law-abiding concealed carriers. He said, my comment addressed agitators approaching law enforcement with a gun and refusing to disarm. My advice stands: if you value your life, do not aggressively approach law enforcement while armed. If they reasonably perceive a threat and you fail to immediately disarm, they are legally permitted to use deadly force. In the aftermath of the shooting, multiple Trump administrations said peaceful protesters do not carry firearms with them. I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign, said Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security Secretary. This is a violent riot, and when you have someone showing up with weapons. In an interview on NBC News, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sought to blame Petty for the shooting, saying he brought a gun. When host Jonathan Karl pushed back, bringing up the Second Amendment, Bessent says, I've been to a protest. Guess what? I didn't bring a gun. I brought a billboard. FBI Director Kash Patel made similar comments on Fox News. No one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines. You cannot bring a firearm with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. They don't have the right to break the law. Patel and other administrators have previously defended Kyle Rittenhouse, who at age 17 brought an AR-15 style rifle to a protest in Kenosha, Washington. And he shot 3 men and killed 2. Similar to a fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good by an immigration agent, Noem and other federal officials almost immediately called Petty, who had no criminal history, a domestic terrorist. Gregory Bovino, a Border Patrol commander, told CNN he respects American Second Amendment rights, but suggests that Petty being armed in a protest indicating intended to commit violence. We respect that Second Amendment right, but those rights don't count when you riot, or assault, delay, or obstruct and impede law enforcement officers, and especially when you're being to do that beforehand. Petty's family condemned the Trump administration's description of Petty and the shooting, calling them sickening lies that are reprehensible and disgusting. The Supreme Court will decide the application of video privacy law. The case focuses on targeted internet advertising. The Supreme Court will decide whether a 1988 privacy law, spurred by the disclosure of a high court nominee's video rental history, should be applied to digital videos watched on a free website. The court on January 26th agreed to review a lower court's ruling that the Privacy Protection Act can't be used to sue a sports website for sharing a user's video watching history with Facebook. After President Reagan nominated Robert Bork to the High Court in 1987, a journalist obtained from his local video store lots of films Bork had rented. Congress responded by creating stiff penalties for any videotape service provider who discloses personal information about their customers without consent. Michael Salazar, a California man who watched videos on a website that covers college sports, wants to use the Privacy Protection Act to file a class action lawsuit against Paramount Global, the owner of 247sports.com. Salazar argues the law bars Paramount from sharing his Facebook ID and video watching history to Meta to create targeted advertising in his feed. Salazar used his 247sports.com's digital subscription to view videos while logged into his Facebook account. The Cincinnati-based 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals disagreed, ruling that signing up for an online newsletter giving Salazar access to videos is not the same as subscribing to actual audio-visual content. But a different appeals court in New York let a similar suit by Salazar against the NBA proceed. Paramount argues that Salazar is suing to get a massive windfall by transforming a blockbuster-era statute about video rental history into a ban against targeted internet advertising. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 12:30, and it's on to the money section. The Christmas Eve Powerball winner finally claims a prize. The lucky lottery winner who won the big $1.8 billion Powerball jackpot on Christmas Eve has claimed their prize nearly a month later. On January 22nd, Powerball announced the winner had stepped forward to claim their prize. The player chose to remain anonymous. Everybody was anxiously waiting for the winner to step forward, but we were happy they took the time to seek legal counsel and financial advice first, as we recommended. Sharon Strong, the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery executive, said in a statement, "We're thrilled that the winner's from Arkansas. The jackpot winner could have chosen to receive annuitized payments or a one-time lump sum of $834 million. According to Powerball, the winner chose the one-time payment. The ticket was sold at Murphy USA, a gas station in Cabot, Arkansas, a city about 25 miles northeast of Little Rock, according to Powerball. The store has received a $50,000 commission for selling the winning ticket. The jackpot was the second largest one in the United States and in Powerball's history. This is the second time in the game's history that a jackpot won on a ticket was sold in Arkansas. The first was in 2010. Under Arkansas law, if a person wins more than $500,000 to the lottery, the winner may request to remain anonymous, but winners can't remain anonymous forever. After 3 years, the name of the person who claimed the jackpot will become information. The law was enacted in 2021. Student loan borrowers get relief. Those in default now are able to keep their tax refunds. Student loan borrowers who are in default now have some good news when it comes to debt collection. The U.S. Department of Education announced Friday, January 16th, that it will delay implementing involuntary collections on federal student loans, including the administration wage garnishing and the Treasury Offset Program. It's unclear, based on the Education Department statement, how long the temporary delay will last. More details will likely be ahead. This tax season is expected to provide sizable refunds to many people, which could drive consumer spending and keep the economy growing. But millions of student loan borrowers risk seeing their wages garnished and tax refunds seized as the long forbearance program that began during the COVID-19 pandemic unwinds and debt collection involves tax refunds and wages resumed. The change comes after much political heat from advocacy groups, including an urgent letter sent in January to the Education Department calling for a delay to avoid what groups called an unprecedented default crisis ahead. The policy director of Protect Borrowers said in a statement recently that the Trump administration's earlier plan would have been economically reckless and have risked punishing nearly 9 million defaulted borrowers even further into debt. After months of pressure and countless horror stories from borrowers, the Trump administration said it has abandoned plans to snatch working people's hard-earned money directly from their paychecks and tax refunds simply for falling behind on their student loans. The National Consumer Law Center said the announcement throws a lifeline to working and middle-class families. Abby Shafroth, the managing director of advocacy at the National Consumer Law Center, says student law borrowers are buckling under the weight of outdated student loan policies that don't reflect today's high cost of living and affordability crisis. She said existing policies and protections were set decades ago and have not been updated to reflect how much money people need to live on, given the sizable increase in prices of the cost of living. For example, she said, the Education Department protects only the first $217.50 a week in wages from garnishment and amount set in 2009. Similarly, she said, the Education Department protects only the first $750 per month of Social Security benefits from seizure. That protection was set in 1996. This summer, the Education Department has paused a plan to resume garnishing Social Security benefits without reform, she said. Turning on collection, largely paused in 2020, therefore put working families and older adults who fall behind on student loans at risk of being pushed into poverty by the federal government. Reforms, Shafroth said, should include include increasing the amount of income protected for basic needs set decades ago to reflect today's much higher cost of living. According to the Education Department, the temporary delay announced on January 16th to give the department more time to implement major student loan repayment reforms under the Working Families Tax Cut Act, which passed last year. And that should give borrowers more options to repay their loans and avoid debt collection. The changes include simplifying repayment options and providing an additional opportunity for borrowers to rehabilitate their federal student loans. The Working Families Act reduces the number of federal student loan repayment plans, eliminate a confusing maze of operations, and make it easier for borrowers to select a single standard repayment plan or income-driven repayment plan that best meets their needs, according to the Education Department. A new income-driven repayment plan waives unpaid interest for borrowers with on-time payments whose payments do not fully cover accrued interest. That includes small matching payments from the Education Department in certain circumstances to ensure that outstanding principal is reduced each month. The new plan will be available for borrowers beginning July 1st, the Education Department said. The delay in collections will give defaulted borrowers additional time to evaluate these new repayment options once they consolidate their loans or complete a repayment or rehabilitation agreement. Under the Act, borrowers now have a second chance to rehabilitate a defaulted loan. This allows them to get their repayments back on track and get the loan out of default. Before the passage of the Act, the law permits borrowers only a single shot at rehabilitation. The delay in collections will give defaulted borrowers additional time to begin the rehabilitation process, including the ability to rehabilitate their loan a second time. During the delay, the department is encouraging borrowers in default to explore their options for resolving their defaulted student loans with the defaulted federal loan servicer. The department is continuing to report student loan defaults to credit reporting agencies. That may have an adverse impact on their credit reports. A student loan expert and author noted that federal income tax refunds were last offset for defaulted federal student loans in 2019, prior to the pandemic. About 1.4 million federal tax refunds were offset then, about 15.2% of the total number of defaulted borrowers. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which was passed by Congress in 2020, suspended enforced collections for the duration of the payment pause, and there are further extensions to the payment pause. It was estimated that almost 11 million borrowers will be in default by the end of March. Here's a hot off the wire story. Joe Brady will replace Sean McDermott as the Buffalo Bills head coach. Nearly a dozen interviews across 8 days led general manager Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills to a candidate who helped the franchise quarterback become MVP of the National Football League. A league source confirmed Bills agreed Tuesday to promote Joe Brady from offensive coordinator to head coach, replacing Sean McDermott, who got fired last week following his 9th season in Buffalo. Brady, who's 36 years old, has called plays for Josh Allen and the Bills since November 2023, when McDermott fired Ken Dorsey and elevated as quarterback's coach. The Bills' offense in 2025 ranked 4th in points at 28.5 and yards per game at 376 per game. James Cook became the first Buffalo player to win the NFL rushing title. Okay, on to the money section here. Tech workers petition urges CEOs to speak up. Condemnation of ICE is first amongst a series of resistance. I'm really sick of ICE. How about you? Said a human resource consultant on LinkedIn about immigration and customs enforcement. A week later, more than 300 tech workers have signed a public petition that she drafted, urging their employers, some of the world's most powerful companies, from Amazon to Google, to use their economic and political clout to press Donald Trump to stop the aggressive immigration enforcement that resulted in the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good and Pettit. For months now, Trump has sent federal agents to our citizens to criminalize us, our neighbors, friends, and colleagues and family members. From Minneapolis to Los Angeles, Chicago, we've been seeing armed and masked thugs bring reckless violence, kidnapping, terror, and cruelty with no end in sight, the petition reads. This cannot continue, and we know the tech industry can make a difference. We want our CEOs to be calling the White House and saying that ICE needs to get out. Deemer, who used to work at a tech company, Stripe, told USA Today in an interview. She pointed to the role Salesforce's Mark Benioff and NVIDIA's Jensen Huang played in persuading the White House not to dispatch National Guard troops to her hometown in November. It worked in San Francisco. I really would love it for it to work in Minnesota right now. Some in the tech world condemn ICE. The public condemnation of ICE, of immigration and customs enforcement tactics, is among the first stirrings of resistance inside the technology companies, where employee activism used to run strong. After the fatal shooting, early Google employee Jeff Dean, and now chief scientist at DeepMind and Google Research, wrote on the X social media platform, "This is completely not okay, and we can't become numb to repeated instances of illegal and unconstitutional action by government agencies. The recent days have been horrific." Nick Throrat, an engineer at Anthropic, said on X that God's killing had stirred something in him. A mother was gunned down in the street by ICE. And the government doesn't even have the decency to perform a scripted condolence, he said. For years, cubicle activists hailing from liberal skewing tech centers agitated for change around the globe inside their own companies, pressuring their employers over contracts with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency and the Pentagon to cover that lack of progress on climate change and workforce diversity, even Google's handling of sexual harassment. During Trump's first term, legions of tech workers volunteered their time and skills, fundraised, and even walked off the job to protest his policies, and their bosses listened. Google co-founder Sergey Brin showed up at a demonstration against the travel ban for Muslim nations during Trump's first term, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai joined thousands of employees during a walkout. Even before the change in the guard in the White House, technology companies, leery of courting political blowback in an increasingly polarized environment, began steering clear of divisive issues like immigration, racial justice, and gay rights, and they've expected their employees to do the same. The issue came to a head when tensions over the war in Gaza spilled into the workplace. Google employees held sit-ins at the company's offices in New York and Sunnyvale, California, in April 2024 to protest a $1.2 billion contract to provide the Israeli government with cloud computing and artificial intelligence services. The tech giant called the police, and then it fired some of them. With the rightward tilt in Silicon Valley, tech employees have been largely quiet as some of the industry's most powerful business leaders lobby the administration and present Trump with lavish gifts while slashing policies and programs like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the administration has sought to obliterate. The tighter job market in tech has played a pivotal role in that silence. As have the limited legal rights of at-will employees who are not protected by the First Amendment guarantee of right of free speech, who have been told by their employers to leave their politics at the door. Companies are being a little more sensitive about topics than the administration is sensitive about, canceling the DEI programs and what. And I think that has made folks afraid to speak out, Deemer said. They don't want to be in the next round of layoffs, and they need their health insurance. I get that. But I do think there are a lot of people who don't agree with the tech's alignment with the administration, and especially with the violence that ICE is perpetuating. And so I think that's going to make more people speak up, especially when they see how many people are already speaking up. In condemning ICE tactics, these workers know they're taking professional and personal risks. Some have signed the petition only to ask their names be removed out of fear for their family's safety, Deemer said. Galen Panger, a user experience researcher at YouTube, says he's not an employee agitator, but he felt compelled to speak out despite the risks. Immigration enforcement is really as important, but there's right ways and wrong ways to go about it. We just can't terrorize our citizens, murder our citizens on the street. Renee Good could have been my mom, and tomorrow Minneapolis, St. Paul could be San Francisco and the peninsula, he told USA Today. What this letter is asking for that I signed is for these really big and important companies to do a little more. They don't have to go out and poke the bear. They don't have to go out and do things that are irresponsible. But they can use their access, they can use their economic might to do a little more and say, let's stop terrorizing our citizens. With employees from Microsoft to OpenAI taking a stand, Deemer said She's hopeful the petition is the start of a new wave of employee activism in Silicon Valley. I'm so grateful for folks who are taking the risk and putting their names out there. I thought this was going to be like a quick Google form type thing, but it seems like it can maybe be more than that. Maybe grow into something and would be really cool. Well, you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 12:45. And here's Ask Johnny column by Johnny C. Taylor, Human Relations Officer. Set clear boundaries about oversharing at work. Question. My coworker tells me every detail about their personal problems, family drama, health scares, relationship issues. It happens almost every day and is becoming exhausting. How do I set boundaries without hurting their feelings? Asked Kylie. Well, the answer, says Johnny, we've all heard leaders say, bring your authentic self to work. Let's be honest, though. Nobody actually wants all of your authentic self at work. I have a teenage daughter, and I can tell you with confidence, there are mornings, often right after school drop-off, when my authentic self is not who I want to bring to a professional setting. And I'm sure my colleagues thank me. But in all seriousness, workplaces don't require full authenticity. They require professionalism. When organizations promote authenticity without clear boundaries, it creates confusion. Sharing every personal challenge may feel genuine to one person, but it can become off as intrusive, distractive, or uncomfortable to another. That confusion often reflects a lack of cultural clarity, something that organizations should address pervasively, starting with hiring and onboarding. SHRM research shows you're not alone. 45% of U.S. workers report being drawn into workplace conversations involving deeply personal details. Nearly half the workforce. While some vulnerability helps build connection, there's a fine line between healthy sharing and oversharing, and when that line is crossed, things get awkward fast. Let's be clear on one thing. You are not your coworker's therapist. You're not paid to listen to daily play-by-plays of their personal life. While your attention may help them feel better, that doesn't make it appropriate or fair for you. If you're dealing with an oversharer, start by politely disengaging. Don't ask follow-up questions. Keep your responses short, neutral, and work-focused. The less reinforcement someone gets, the less likely they are to continue. Oversharing often thrives on attention. If that doesn't work, it's time to be more direct. Decide what feels uncomfortable or exhausting and communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully. You have a right to a work environment that allows you to focus and perform, but setting boundaries is your responsibility. That said, not every irritation is a human relations issue. Some situations come down to personality differences. You won't connect with everyone, and that's okay. But when someone's behavior interferes with your ability to do your job, it's reasonable to address it directly. And if you've tried disengaging and setting boundaries with no change, it's time to involve your manager or HR. They're best positioned to reinforce expectations, help someone understand how their behavior is affecting others. At the end of the day, work is not group therapy. It's a place to collaborate, contribute, and perform. Thoughtful boundaries protect not just you, but the workplace as a whole. And the final story, Gold IRA may glitter, but it has limitations. Investment plan gives savers a different type of beyond stocks and bonds. For some retirement savers, a gold IRA can be appealing, especially for those looking for a potential hedge against inflation or market uncertainty. A gold IRA lets you hold physical gold inside a retirement account, offering a different type of investment beyond stocks and bonds. At the same time, moving money into physical metals comes with added fees, stricter rules, and limitations that don't apply to traditional retirement accounts. Take a closer look at both benefits, and the drawbacks can help you decide whether this strategy makes sense for your long-term goals. The primary appeal of a gold IRA lies in how gold behaves relative to traditional financial assets. Gold IRAs are often considered patient money meaning that an asset that can be acquired and held for a relatively long period of time until market or personal circumstances indicate it's time for liquidation and or distribution, said Scott Maurer, a certified IRA services professional and vice president at Advanta IRA, a nationwide self-directed IRA provider. Portfolio diversification. While Gold IRA isn't designed to replace stocks or bonds, it can offer certain benefits when used selectively as part of a diversified retirement portfolio. Because gold often behaves differently from stocks and bonds during periods of market stress, gold may reduce overall portfolio volatility rather than move in lockstep with equities. A potential hedge against inflation and uncertainty. Gold as an asset is often seen as a way to address the effects of inflation, currency volatility, and economic fluctuations. So choosing gold matches the risk profile for which many retirement investors are looking for. While not guaranteed, gold has historically played a defensive role in certain market environments. Tax advantages within a retirement account. A gold IRA follows the same tax rules as other IRAs. Depending on the account type, investors may benefit from tax-deferred growth or tax-free withdrawals in retirement. Exposure to a physical asset. Unlike stocks or exchange-traded funds, a gold IRA holds physical metal. For some investors, tangible assets provide added psychological or strategic comfort as part of a long-term plan. The cons of a gold IRA? Despite their appeal, gold IRAs come with important drawbacks that investors should understand before committing funds. While having a small position in precious metals may dampen portfolio volatility in the short run, the trade-off between slightly dampened volatility and the lost long-term return is not a prudent one, particularly for investors with long investing time horizons, according to Robert Johnson of Creighton University. Market volatility. A gold IRA isn't immune to market swings, even if it behaves differently from stocks or bonds. Gold prices fluctuate based on global economic conditions, interest rates, and currency values and investor sentiment, and can move sharply during periods of uncertainty. When gold prices hit record highs, for example, it underscores why understanding how to buy gold safely matters just as much as deciding whether to buy it at all. Gold is a speculative investment, meaning the price of gold is not determined by its intrinsic value, but simply by its expected selling price to someone in the future, Johnson said. While gold is often viewed as a hedge during uncertain times, it can still be volatile and may go through long stretches of flat or declining performance. No income or dividends. Unlike stocks or bonds, gold doesn't generate cash flows and thus isn't an investment in the same way, says Alex Michalka, Vice President of Investment Research at Wealthfront. While stocks pay dividends and bonds pay interest, gold held in an IRA produces no ongoing cash flow. Any return depends entirely on whether the price of gold rises over time. Higher fees. Federal regulators have warned that self-directed IRAs, including those holding precious metals, can be vulnerable to higher fees and misleading sales tactics if investors aren't careful. Common fees include a one-time setup charge, annual custodial fees, and ongoing storage costs charged by the depository. Over time, these expenses can add up and eat into returns, particularly for small account balances or investors who hold gold for shorter periods. While gold held inside an IRA is taxed according to IRA rules at withdrawal, Michalka notes that gold's higher tax treatment in taxable accounts is another factor investors often overlook when comparing alternatives. Long-term gains from sales of gold are taxed at the same rate as collectibles, currently 28%, compared to the highest long-term gain rates of 20%, Michalka warns. Liquidity limitations. Selling gold inside an IRA isn't as quick or simple as selling stocks or ETFs. Transactions can take longer to complete, and the price you receive may depend on dealer buyback policies and market conditions at the time of sale. Taking physical possession of the gold before retirement can also trigger taxes and potential early withdrawal penalties. Gold IRAs must follow strict internal service rules about which metals are allowed. where they're stored, and how transactions are handled. Buying ineligible coins or attempting home storage can cause the IRS to treat the account as a distribution, leading to unexpected taxes and penalties. And how does a gold IRA compare with other ways of holding gold? A gold IRA isn't the only way to hold gold or manage risk inside a retirement account. Many investors weigh it against keeping assets in cash or buying physical gold outright. Looking at how these options compare can help you decide which approach best matches your goals, time horizon, and comfort with risk. Gold versus cash in a retirement account. Gold and cash can play very different roles inside a retirement account. Cash and cash equivalent investments, such as money market funds, offer stability and liquidity, but may lose purchasing power over time due to inflation. Gold, on the other hand, doesn't generate income and can be volatile, but some investors view it as a potential source of value during periods of inflation or economic stress. For many retirement savers, the choice isn't strictly gold or cash. Cash is often used for short-term needs like flexibility or risk management, while gold may be used as a small long-term diversifier rather than a primary holding. Gold IRA versus buying physical gold outright. A gold IRA offers tax advantages that don't apply when buying physical gold directly, but those benefits come with added fees and regulatory rules. Buying physical gold outright provides direct ownership and immediate access, but offers no tax benefits. The better option depends on your goals, time horizon, whether you're investing primarily for retirement or for personal ownership outside of a tax-advantaged account. And who should consider a gold IRA? A gold IRA may be worth considering for investors who are, one, focused on long-term retirement savings rather than short-term trading, or two, want to diversify a portfolio heavily concentrated in stocks and bonds, or three, are comfortable with higher fees in exchange for physical asset exposure, or four, are rolling over funds from an existing IRA or employer-sponsored plans, and five, understand and can follow IRS rules governing precious metal accounts. Bottom line, is a gold right for your retirement strategy? Makes sense as a supplemental retirement investment rather than a core holding. It can play a role in diversification and inflation hedging, but fees, lack of income, and regulatory complexity mean it isn't suitable for everyone. Well, you're listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for Tuesday, January 27th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reading today has been Alan Blackburn.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Patty Young. Life. Television review. Dempsey goes all Neeson in memory of a killer. McDreamy no more. Patrick Dempsey may still have his silver fox hair and a disarming glint in his eyes, but don't look for comforting hugs and romantic meet-cutes in his latest TV role. No, the one-time Grey's Anatomy heartthrob has officially crossed over into his Liam Neeson era. There's a distinct dad killer vibes to Memory of a Killer, premiering in a 2-night event on Fox starting January 25th, immediately following the NFC Championship game, then moving to Mondays at 9 Eastern Time, starting on January 26th. In addition to the big football lead-in, Memory of a Killer has everything a dad could want in his capers: mob bosses, assassins, black Porsches, and existential reminders of the fleeting nature of life and memory and the hardships of aging. Some of that is standard fodder for a Neeson or Sylvester Stallone geriatric action thriller, but Memory of a Killer, 2.5 stars, has a greater emphasis on the geriatric part, with a focus at its aging protagonist's cognitive function. Dempsey plays the titular killer, Angelo, a hired hitman, managing a double life between the worlds of organized crime in New York City and a milder, family-focused existence in the suburbs. In the city, he's a professional killer employed by his genial but dangerous pal, Dutch, Michael Imperioli. While in the burbs, he's a copier salesman who spends time with his pregnant daughter, Odeya Rush, and son-in-law, Daniel David Stewart. Chaos from both lives start to violently collide just as Angelo starts forgetting the security code to his apartment and accidentally leaving his gun in the fridge. In an ambitious philosophical concept for a network TV show, the episodes are not procedural, case of the week, easy viewing, but part of a larger narrative about Angelo's work life intersecting with his home life. Dempsey has all the glower required, when he is wearing the right apparel and driving the right car, that is. Via an abandoned gas station, Angelo goes from his killer, literally, black suits and gelled hairstyle to wool sweaters and loose curls straight out of a Better Homes and Gardens spread. If Angelo's home life is less thrilling, his assassin life is pretty fun, particularly in any scenes shared with Imperioli, alum of The Sopranos, who radiates organized crime without even having to utter a single line. So what happens when dementia, which so far is only implied in the script, comes for Angelo, a man with some terrible memories, as the title of the show suggests? In the first 2 episodes, made available for review, it's hard to tell exactly how much Angelo's declining mental capacity will play into the show overall. In those episodes, he's more concerned with mourning his late murdered wife, killing his targets in the showiest ways possible, protecting his daughter from any criminal elements who may have discovered his private identity, and bashing his son-in-law's business prospects. He's a busy guy, but it's clear his memory will take more precedence as the show goes on, especially as we see Angelo's brother Michael, Richard Clarkin, dealing with Alzheimer's himself and is living in a memory care home. The series is based on De Zack Alzheimer's The Alzheimer Case, a book by Belgian novelist Jeff Gerards that's already been adapted for the screen twice, first in a 2003 Belgian film of the same name, then in the 2022 American movie Memory, starring the actual Liam Neeson. But Memory of a Killer isn't quite the neo-noir thriller of its source material. It's a bit lackluster and tedious, particularly during scenes of Angelo's Leave It to Beaver family life. Without actors as talented and charming as Dempsey and Imperioli, it would be entirely forgettable. Their powerful, charismatic presence, however, suggests this is worth sticking with beyond the 2-night premiere. Too often, stars like Dempsey get typecast in the same role over and over again, so it's easy to see why he would be attracted to Memory of a Killer, for which he also serves as executive producer. And if it does nothing besides expand Dempsey's range and persona, it will certainly be an achievement. If it goes deeper and finds more thrills and surprises as the season goes on, it can be another kind of success entirely. Only then might it be a show worth remembering. Books. Author. Women Down. Not Colleen Hoover fan fiction. An author retreats offline after a major scandal involving a movie adaptation of one of her books. Sound like Colleen Hoover to you? This plot may mirror Hoover's own controversy. She stepped away from the public eye following the 2024 lawsuits between It Ends With Us stars Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. But the author is making it clear to readers that her new book is anything but coho fan fiction. Women Down, out now from Amazon Publishing's Montlake imprint, is a romantic suspense thriller about an author forced into a hiatus after public backlash. Please, I beg of you, do not try to make ties to my personal life and this story, as there are none, Hoover writes in an introductory author's note. Women Down is Colleen Hoover's darkest book yet. Perhaps Hoover has good reason to clarify the book's firm fictional status. Women Down gets very dark, filled with plenty of infidelity and toxicity that she likely doesn't want readers ascribing to her personal life. The novel is adapted from a short story, Saint, which first appeared in the now unpublished anthology, One More Step. Hoover changed the name of her protagonist and added the adaptation angle. Just please keep in mind that while writers do take from their own lives, and some of the themes may mirror my own life in ways, this is in no way a replica of my journey or my morals, nor is it a reflection of how I feel about my peers and or this industry, Hoover writes in the author's note in Women Down. This is simply a fun journey the characters took me on and nothing more. After skyrocketing to viral book talk fame, Hoover faced criticism for her portrayal of domestic violence in the book and movie adaptation of It Ends With Us, which some fans argued glamorized abuse. In a November interview with Elle, Hoover said that while she respects readers' passionate opinions, she would not change a thing because that was my mother's experience, and It Ends With Us was just one woman's story. She also said that she wouldn't write the book today, worried about scrutiny. Hence, the introduction to her Woman Down, I'm just a writer writing about a writer, but I am in no way advocating for or defending the characters' behaviors and or thoughts, Hoover writes in the author's note. Hoover says career became more stressful than normal. Hoover also sheds little light on her own hiatus. Nearly a year ago, the author returned to Instagram after deactivating her account amid the controversy when the movie debuted in August 2024. Photos with Lively and Baldoni and of the film's promotional tour were notably wiped. In November, Hoover admitted to Elle that she doesn't like to talk about the book publicly either. I can't even recommend it anymore, Hoover told the outlet. I feel like the lawsuit has overshadowed it. I'm almost embarrassed to say I wrote it. When people ask what I do, I'm just like, I'm a writer. Please don't ask me what I wrote. It's been nearly 3 years since Hoover released a new book, her last being the It Ends With Us prequel, It Starts With Us. In her author's note, Hoover writes that it's taken her so long to release a new story because she's been trying out new things outside of writing. From a Hollywood standpoint, Hoover has been busy. The film adaptation of Regretting You came out in 2025, and adaptations for 2 other books, Reminders of Him and the wildly popular Verity, will hit screens this year. Hoover also has her own production company, Heartbones Entertainment, and frankly, I needed some space from a career I was beginning to find more stressful than normal, Hoover writes. But that changed when I dove back into this story. Rewriting this book gave me back the same joy I felt while writing the original short story. Petra, the Woman Down protagonist, feels similarly disenchanted with writing. It's what drives her to a remote cabin on a lake and ultimately into the arms of her detective muse. I've been unable to function since all of this started. I feel like a fraud. I feel like everything I've built has crashed down around me, and I'm buried in rubble that no one even cares to dig through because they aren't even curious if I'm suffocating to death. They only want to know who would show up at my funeral after I do suffocate to death. Petra narrates in Woman Down. Health and wellness, an aging side effect Sarah Jessica Parker couldn't see. In a Midtown hotel suite, Sarah Jessica Parker is smiling as she enters the room. A week earlier, the Sex and the City icon received the Carol Burnett Award, given to a person who has made outstanding contributions to television on or off screen at the inaugural Golden Eve celebration on January 6th. But the star isn't here to talk about TV. Parker, 60, wants to speak about reading and aging, and how, for her, those two things have become intertwined. She first noticed changes to her vision while reading in bed while she was in Ireland. I just recall that particular moment, just recognizing that your eyes weren't doing what they had always done so well and so beautifully, she says. Everyday tasks also became more challenging, looking at menus, texting, and reading instructions while cooking. She visited the eye doctor and discovered that she was experiencing age-related blurry near vision, a condition that affects nearly all middle-aged adults, according to the American Optometric Association. This normal change in the eye's focusing ability, called presbyopia, can start in the early to mid-40s and progress until age 60. It proved frustrating for Parker, an avid reader, actress, and on-the-go mother. My eyes were shot. As a judge for the 2025 Booker Prize, a prestigious literary award, Parker read 169 books. She had 7 months to read 153 books, then reread a long list of 13 titles, and then reread a short list of 6. There are only 5 judges, so you can't hide. You have to be fully prepared, she recalls. But there were times at the end where I couldn't see. She told her daughter Loretta that her eyes were shot. She went in for a routine eye exam, and her doctor said that every 20 minutes she had to stop reading and focus her vision. Towards the end of the judging process, she started using Viz, a prescription eye drop to treat age-related blurry near vision for up to 10 hours. She's currently a spokesperson for the brand. As a parent, she's always on the move, and her vision issues began to impact her day-to-day life. Now that she's taking better care of her eyes, she's noticed tasks like doing laundry and grocery shopping have become easier. It's just different, she explains. There's clarity. Parker opens a conversation around accessibility in reading. For decades, Parker would carry an extra suitcase just for books while traveling. Then she got a Kindle, which held all her books in one tiny device. But now she's back to the physical books. I would rather have the books than the extra 2 shirts or a skirt, she says. I want a book in my hand. We're facing a literacy crisis, according to a YouGov survey. 2 in 5 Americans did not read a single book in 2025. But in the reading community, there's an ongoing debate between audiobook enthusiasts and skeptics. Apps like Audible and Libby make listening to audiobooks easier than ever. But some say audiobooks don't count as real reading. But for people with visual impairments or other physical limitations, audiobooks are a major accessibility win. I don't think we should judge the way people are consuming books, she says. Even though books have had a great year, reading is down significantly, so I don't think there's any wrong or right way. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 14 minutes after the hour. Streaming. British comedy Taskmaster is taking over America. You need to learn about the latest British show making its way across the pond to the United States. Your time starts now. That Anglophile sensation is Taskmaster, a British comedy panel show in which 5 comedians compete in silly tasks and are then given arbitrary points by another comedian. It's sort of like if a bunch of kids set up ridiculous games in their backyard, graded each other, filmed it, and broadcast it to millions around the world on YouTube. And somehow, all that wackiness has coalesced into a superb and consistently funny TV show, which made USA Today's list of the 10 best TV shows of 2025. It's via YouTube where the series, which began in the United Kingdom in 2015, has thrived and developed an international following. That includes a dedicated U.S. fan base that has shown up ecstatically for a limited live show tour this January, making stops in Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, and New York. Headed by the series' eponymous Taskmaster Greg Davies and creator Taskmaster's assistant Alex Horn, the sold-out live shows confirm just how popular Taskmaster has become in the United States. Plus, they've been absolutely hilarious. We have no idea, or rather we have a developing idea, of how popular the show is, Davies, 57, told USA Today in an interview January 19th, alongside Horn in Philadelphia, ahead of that leg of the tour. Last year, when we came and did a show in New York, we were blown away by people stopping us in the streets. We had no idea what to expect, and the same was true of this tour. We sort of had an idea the show was popular on YouTube, but we've been amazed by the enthusiasm. It's mad, says Horn, 47, who created the series out of a concept he debuted at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2010. It's now a sprawling franchise with versions across the world, from New Zealand to Sweden to Croatia. It feels like Comic-Con sometimes, he says. We have people dressing up as characters from the show. The unscripted show stars characters that are the heightened personas of comedians of varying levels of fame, each of them competing over 10 episodes worth of tasks each season. And those contestants are getting closer to home as the show's popularity grows. American comedian Jason Mantzoukas, known for stints on The Good Place and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, joined for season 19, and Kumail Nanjiani of Silicon Valley and The Big Sick will be on the upcoming 21st season, alongside Veep creator Armando Iannucci. Davies and Horn say their wish list of other American comedians includes Sarah Silverman, Mike Birbiglia, Ali Wong, and Conan O'Brien, but they are down to have anyone on Taskmaster who understands the ethos of the show. I think the show would be really fun with someone like Conan, who is used to being the funniest person in the room and the person who's pulling all the levers and making the thing happen. It would be fun to see him exist in our controlled world, Davies says. In his Taskmaster character, Davies acts as a dictator, his word, judging comedians for their performance in 5 absurd tasks an episode, like eat as much watermelon as you can in 1 minute, or find the cheese phone using only your sense of smell, or paint a portrait on the door with your feet, or just hide 3 eggplants in this small room. The magic of the series comes in the complete buy-in of the contestants, as well as Davies and Horn. Horn's character is a meek, annoying, and sycophantic version of himself. In the live shows, Davies and Horn have answered fan questions and then invited 3 members of the audience to the stage to participate alongside guest comedians. The shows so far have featured comics like Joel Kim Booster and Chris Gethard, who have been as giddy and starstruck as the audience members to get a chance to play sausage or finger, and the other farcical games on stage. We're relying on the audience's members being funny and smart, and they haven't let us down, Horn says. The short tour has already sparked calls from American fans for a more extensive engagement that heads out west. At the moment, however, Horn and Davies have plenty of work to do just with the daily grind of getting the show to air, but they're open to any possibility for the future. I think it's more fun if the future is not by design, but we go where we get led, Davies says. Alex has come up with this amazing show that people seem to like, and wherever that takes us, we're happy. However, they do have one really, really big aspiration for a future Taskmaster contestant. But Prince William, we do want Prince William on the show, Horn says. Davies agreed. I think it would be really funny if we could get a USA Today headline that says, "Pressure mounts on Prince William to join an entertainment show." Ex-child star McCurdy gets real about her distaste for Hollywood. When you're talking to Jeanette McCurdy, it's easy to forget her career started as a Nickelodeon actor, not during a highbrow MFA creative writing program. McCurdy may have grown up in the spotlight on shows like iCarly and Sam and Cat, but she has the soul of a writer. She's more comfortable alone at her desk than she is getting glitzed up for TV interviews like those she's done for her debut novel, Half His Age. Writers are recluse creatures, I agree. We bond, however strange it is to talk in front of a 4-camera setup. We decide we'll look at each other and ignore the publicists, stylists, and camera crew watching beyond the lights. McCurdy is not content to be the sole participant in an interview conversation. When we talk about her protagonist self-isolating in her relentless pursuit of a relationship, she wants to know if that's ever happened to me. When she explains that she put down another writing project to work on Half His Age because the story erupted out of her, she calls it a vomit draft. She wants to know the last thing I wrote that made me feel like that. Meet Jeanette McCurdy, the author. McCurdy's press tour is inherently different from that of a writer who got their start writing books. Her 2022 memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, was unflinching in its portrayal of abuse, eating disorders, and the dark sides of childhood stardom. Readers are as hungry to know about her personal life as they are about her new work. I thought of this while I listened to a recent Call Her Daddy podcast episode featuring McCurdy. Early in the conversation, host Alex Cooper paused their discussion on the book's power dynamics and asked if McCurdy would go back to childhood first. Haven't spent enough time in childhood and therapy, so might as well do more, McCurdy said to Cooper. At this stage in her career, McCurdy has made a conscious, deliberate shift to be known not as a former child actor, but as an author with a capital A. I asked her to explain that to me. What were her intentions in defining this new era of her career? Can I just say I really appreciate this question, really, on a heart level. McCurdy says from a couch in USA Today's New York studio. Because it was intentional. But it also wasn't me just going like, you know what? I want to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. It's something I've done my whole life. It's something that, as a child, has always been the way that I've processed the world. Acting was my mom's dream. She literally wanted to be a famous actress, and her parents wouldn't let her. So then she lived sort of vicariously through me. But writing was also the thing that I wanted to do. Since her memoir published, she's noticed a change in her interactions with fans. A 180, she says. She appreciates conversations with kindred spirits, readers that are rooted in respect and dialogue. She grew up with fans shouting at her and grabbing her with an uncomfortable amount of squeeze, making their kids take pictures with her. I feel more of a sense of belonging in the literary world than I ever did in Hollywood, McCurdy says. I've been finding my people and feeling like I've got lifelong friends, and they're authors. These are my people. These are my friends. A seed of truth in McCurdy's inspiration for Half His Age. Uncomfortable, however, is a word McCurdy embraces when it comes to the book itself. Half His Age follows Waldo, a high schooler who initiates an obsessive, entangled sexual relationship with her creative writing teacher. Waldo is very different from McCurdy. She's bolder and less naive than McCurdy was at 17, she says. McCurdy tells me she felt she missed out on teenage years she describes in Half His Age, but there's a grain of truth in the age gap relationship plot. McCurdy herself was in a creepy relationship with an older man when she was 18. All writers put a degree of themselves into their work, even if it's fiction. How could you not? I don't know how it could be done without having some piece of yourself, some seed of it, she says. Writing Waldo was healing for her, McCurdy says. Writing is a way to process unprocessed feelings, and that really was the thing that drove the book out of me, McCurdy says. In a way, Half His Age does exist in the afterglow of her memoir. If you felt uneasy laughing at McCurdy's humor between harrowing childhood stories in I'm Glad My Mom Died, just wait until you read the sex scenes between a 17-year-old and her 40-something married creative writing teacher. That's purposeful, McCurdy tells me. I think the value of discomfort is another conversation that I hope surfaces, McCurdy says. It can be a sexy read, but at times it can be, to your point, an uncomfortable one. I think being uncomfortable is so useful and so valuable, and it's an indication that there is a conversation to be had. I can't really think of many times when I'm comfortable and there's a juicy conversation and there's something to dissect. One firm foot in publishing, one toe back in Hollywood. A week after she finished the manuscript for Half His Age, McCurdy wrote it into a screenplay. It's now been confirmed for adaptation, and she's attached to direct it. Stepping into the writer's room instead of an actor's trailer is more appealing Hollywood access point now. McCurdy is eager to tackle adaptation, a task she thinks best suited for authors themselves. How often do you hear, "Oh well, the movie was better than the book"? McCurdy says. There's a reason for that. It's because the author has that story in them, and they've articulated it already once, beautifully. Why wouldn't we assume that they could do it again in a different format? It only makes sense. They have that voice. They have that vision. I think so often the thing is handed off to another pair of hands, and then the voice gets muddled, the vision gets lost. I'm Glad My Mom Died will soon be a 10-episode Apple TV Plus dramedy starring Jennifer Aniston as the titular mother. McCurdy will act as writer, director, and showrunner on the series. In both projects, she'll inevitably work with child actors. They may feel the same pressure she faced as a young person in Hollywood. Does she see herself as a mentor or have a concept of what working with young actors in Hollywood will be like? I honestly never considered that, McCurdy says. I see Hollywood as kind of the background piece. I'm writing my books, and that's really my primary focus. And then Hollywood can be its noisy circus that I kind of dip my toe in here and there. But books really are my focus and where I feel the most comfortable and where the world makes the most sense. My experience at the publishing world is that it's not insane, which is great. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 28 minutes after the hour. Back on Mountaintop. Super Bowl 60, New England Patriots versus Seattle Seahawks. Patriots' super rebound starts, ends with Vrabel. As Will Campbell answered questions amid a victorious celebration in the visitors' locker room where the New England Patriots toasted their 10-7 victory over the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship game with cans of Miller Lite, Garrett Bradbury had to interject. He doesn't even know what expletive means, Bradbury shouted. How could a rookie left tackle put this into perspective? Bradbury, a 7-year veteran who was part of a high-impact free agent class signed last offseason, could hardly describe the absolute dogfight that led to the Patriots becoming kings of the AFC for a league-leading 12th time. You can't put it into words what this means, he said. It doesn't feel real. It's like a simulation, like what's going on. The vibes in this locker room, the celebration with this team, it means everything. The Patriots have heard from every corner of the football ecosystem how undeserving the pennant is. The easy regular season schedule, the turnover luck, the fact that the Denver Broncos had to start Jarrett Stidham at quarterback in place of injured Bo Nix, The Patriots will be underdogs in Super Bowl 60 regardless of opponent. The 53 guys in the locker, the coaching staff, the front office, to put it mildly, do not care. How else do you go from 4-13 to 14-3, AFC East champions, and now bound for the Super Bowl for the first time since the 2018 season? You have to believe things sometimes, head coach Mike Vrabel said, before you can see them. Welcome to the Church of Vrabes, Pats Nation. You get everybody to believe in something and buy in, and that doesn't come with adversity, said Vrabel, who repeated his popular refrain that his coaching calling is rooted in supporting the players. As a 14-year NFL linebacker, he's been in their position. As someone who won 3 Super Bowls as part of the first era of the New England Patriots dynasty of the early 2000s, he's been in the game's mountaintop on multiple occasions and wants others to feel the sense of accomplishment that comes with that. He wants it for their families who make sacrifices, for the players themselves, for the fans. They're fun to coach. They're entertaining, Vrabel said of his team. They've been resilient. They've been very coachable. There's a lot of connectivity in them. I appreciate what they do. Having a second-year quarterback who is an MVP candidate in Drake May also helps when it comes to establishing winning ways. Now May and Vrabel did something not even Tom Brady and Bill Belichick could manage during their dynastic domination: win a playoff game at Mile High. I respect and appreciate what the Patriots dynasty did, and unfortunately, they didn't come out with some wins there. But we changed that narrative and look forward to bringing our best football to Santa Clara, May said. That'll be pretty special. Patriots turnaround engineered an off-season roster overhaul. Patriots Executive Vice President of Player Personnel, Elliot Wolf, said that the off-season priority, working with Vrabel, was finding players who would fit our culture. That happened to be available that were good players, Wolf told USA Today Sports. We were able to hit on some of those guys. The key was that those signings, in most cases, outplayed the league-wide expectation of them, which is really a testament to their work ethic, Wolf said. It's been fun to watch. It's really cool to work with Mike and understand what he's looking for in players. It's one of the coolest things about Mike. It's all genuine. It's all, this is what the expectation is. And if you're not going to be up to it, you're probably not going to be here too long. But it's really cool to see guys come in here and trust the guy next to him and work for each other. It's not a selfish group at all. For defensive lineman Milton Williams, one of those coveted free agents, the postseason was a chance to stand out in the locker room. As of the divisional round of the playoffs, he was the only player who was still going at that point a year prior, as a member of the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Crazy. It's crazy. I didn't expect it this fast, said Williams, who started believing this team could be special following a Week 5 win on the road against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. But we got a bunch of dogs that's hungry, a lot of guys that have been counted out, nobody really believing in us all year, picking everybody else all year, all the noise. None of that matters when you go out on that field and do what you're supposed to do. Right tackle Morgan Moses, who was emotional coming off the field, called his sons upon entering the locker room. They were crying. He started crying more. He thought about how the Patriots went 9-0 on the road. In Moses' view, it was the road less traveled. It took me 12 years to get here, he said, but I didn't get here by myself. That's what a football team is, Moses said. And when it all works out, this is the outcome. Just the brotherhood that we built, Moses said. All the guys that we bought in free agency. Hats off to our front office, the guys we drafted. One example of the brotherhood is the bond Moses formed with Campbell, whose locker is adjacent to Moses at the team facility. Will came to me and was like, yo, I appreciate everything that you do. A lot of guys your age wouldn't play through some of the things that you play through, Moses said. To hear that from the rookie he took under his wing from day one meant a lot. I feel like I've learned more from him than he's learned from me, Campbell said. Moses said, I feel like that's the nature of the game. We've been through so much. Pats point to Vrabel as team's consistent. Campbell remembered telling Wolf and Vrabel during the pre-draft process that he wanted to be part of the organization for reasons like this. The years of losing at the end of Belichick's tenure and the one season of 4-13 Jared Mayo led futility didn't scare him. Anytime you walk through a place of work, that's the only goal in mind, Campbell said. We don't show up to lose. I'm just super grateful to be here. Another rookie running back, Trevain Henderson, acknowledged the rough seasons before 2025. Just being able to have Coach Vrabes come in and help turn this organization to be where we are now, it's amazing, he said. But it took a lot of hard work. Yeah, it took a lot, man. We've been through so much this year. The one constant in each player's post-game message revolved around one person, Vrabel. After the Tennessee Titans made the mistake of firing him following the 2023 season, Vrabel went from being shown the door to opening new ones for a new group of players. He's meant everything, tight end Hunter Henry said. Just his mentality, his balance of being a player but also coaching in this league. Demanding a lot, but also understanding us in a way has been huge. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs, who had 5 receptions for 17 yards, said he realized leadership in the NFL flows from the top down. Holding everyone accountable becomes a self-policing standard in the locker room among the players themselves. The camaraderie and the team chemistry that he's built from the head coaching position, Diggs said, I hope he wins Coach of the Year. Bradbury said the term player-friendly is thrown around a lot, but it often takes form in different ways. Few with as much impact as Vrabel's had roughly 1 year. It's hard on us when he's need to be, but he's also fun a lot of the time, Bradbury said. I think this whole locker room will ride with that guy. He's absolutely unbelievable. To share the vision that he wanted in April and to see it come to fruition, and you're never arrived. You're constantly trying to show who you are and put it on film. Bradbury called the 2025 season the most rewarding year of his football career, a journey that includes a flight back to New England eventually as a massive snowstorm blanketed the northeast United States and delayed the Pats' homecoming. As of Vrabel's post-game meeting with the team, the buses for the airport were leaving the hotel at 8 a.m. To that end, he instituted no curfew for his players Sunday night in Denver. If they missed the bus the next morning, however, they would not play in the Super Bowl. Nobody in their right mind would want to miss out on the ride, figuratively or literally, at this point. Sorry, Sam Darnold, you are indeed the man. Sam Darnold was just minutes removed from securing his first Super Bowl trip. As a starter, more on that important distinction later, and he'd already wrangled an apology out of me. In the aftermath of a drama-filled 31-27 defeat of the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC Championship game, which gave Darnold's Seattle Seahawks the rubber match in their epic thrillology of games against their NFC West rivals this season, I asked him about his personal journey from the New York Jets quarterback who infamously admitted seeing ghosts amid a 4-interception debacle against the New England Patriots on Monday Night Football more than 6 years ago, into the 2-time Pro Bowler he is now, and head of a much bigger game against the Pats. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. So thanks, Darnold cracked back good-naturedly. Sam, I am sorry. And you most certainly weren't sorry in what was probably the best football performance of your life. No, you're good, he smiled, while indulging my question with a moment of reflection. There was a lot I didn't know back then, so I'm just going to continue to learn and grow in this great game. There's a lot of stuff that I can do better from today. I feel like I'm missing throws out there that I shouldn't miss. There were some things offensively that I feel like we can do better. We're always looking to get better. I'm always looking to get better. So that's the great part about this game. You win an NFC championship and you win games throughout the season, but there's always ways you can look to get better. It's a very Darnold answer for a guy who's overcome so much adversity in 8 NFL seasons. Upbeat, hopeful, forward-leaning. All it was missing was a dollop of credit to his teammates, but he doled out plenty of that Sunday night as well. I never could logically grasp why the Jets gave up on an obviously talented, always centered young guy, one who's been beloved in every locker room he's graced. Why draft Zach Wilson in 2021? I know reset the quarterback contractual clock, when you could have actually built something around Darnold, maybe by taking Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase or Micah Parsons instead. But nope, Darnold was dealt to the Carolina Panthers for a package that included a second-round pick and a whole lot of nothing else that didn't make the Jets any better. He then had cups of coffee with the San Francisco 49ers and Minnesota Vikings, who miraculously didn't keep him in the aftermath of his 2024 breakout season. Oops. The Seahawks were only too happy to reel in the perennial cast-off who whipped an excellent Rams defense Sunday, 346 yards and 3 touchdown passes spilling off his right arm, with nary a turnover in the signature performance of his career. And it was achieved with a lingering oblique injury suffered before Seattle's divisional playoff round victory over the Niners. I'm not a quarterback expert, but that's some high-powered quarterbacking going on in that game by number 14. For sure, said Seahawks coach Mike Macdonald, who said Darnold barely threw the ball in practice in the days leading up to the Hawks-Rams Part 3. It should go down as one of the best performances in playoff history, and it might. There was Darnold's 51-yard completion to Rashid Shaheed on Seattle's opening drive that set up Kenneth Walker's 2-yard touchdown run. There was the 42-yard shot to Darnold's favorite target, Jackson Smith-Njigba, that preceded a 14-yard touchdown strike to JSN 3 players later, stalking Seattle to a 17-13 halftime lead it would never relinquish. When the Seahawks seemed to stall after opening the second half with the ball, Darnold made the Rams pay for their latest special teams error, a muffled punt, by hitting rarely used Jake Bobo for a 17-yard touchdown on the very next play. And though LA wouldn't go away, neither would Darnold, who hooked up with ex-Rams Super Bowl hero Cooper Kupp for one more touchdown later in the period. He showed us exactly who he always thought he was, said Seahawks defensive lineman Leonard Williams, a Southern Cal product like Darnold and a teammate of his with those lowly Jets. I mean, since day one, I think this whole organization, this whole team, everybody in this locker room trusted him, regardless of the doubts or ups and downs or anything like that we've had throughout the season. That's one thing that's always stayed true, is our trust in our quarterback. He's a great leader, and I mean, he really saved us today. I'm so happy for him, Williams continued, to show up in a game like this when there's so many doubters. It's big time for him. And now Darnold is truly headed for the big time as Seattle prepares to face New England in Super Bowl 60. It's an opportunity for the 3rd overall pick by the Jets of the vaunted 2018 quarterback draft class to become the first passer of that draft to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. Not Josh Allen, not Lamar Jackson, not Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold. Asked how it felt to be the first quarterback from that group to reach Super Bowl Sunday, Darnold, now in his 5th NFL team, remained in rare form with another zinger. I actually made it in 23 as well when I was in San Francisco. So, he grinned, referencing his one-year stop in Kyle Shanahan's halfway house for quarterbacks where Darnold backed up Brock Purdy. No, it's unbelievable. Obviously, those are great players, but it's more so the team, just the hard work that we've put in throughout the season. We take it day by day, and then that's the beauty about this team and these guys in that locker room, this coaching staff. And speaking of that staff, you can bet there's no one they'd rather have than Darnold, who's galvanized this group from the moment he signed with Seattle last March when he replaced Geno Smith. McDonald left nothing to the imagination when I asked him about the narrative of the Seahawks being a dominant team, so long as Darnold doesn't undermine them with costly mistakes, like another 4-interception game he had in a loss to the Rams in Week 11. McDonald responded to my query by exclaiming, "Everyone wants to make a narrative about this guy, but it's like he's been the same guy since he walked in the door. You don't want me writing the stories because I will not write the narratives that are out there. I'd be really boring. His teammates love him, and he's competitive as crap, and he's tough, and he's really talented, and he's the man. That would be the story. So don't let me write the story. I've got this one, Coach. Hopefully it's not boring, and it stands to reason Darnold won't be either. 2 weeks from now, when he gets his biggest opportunity yet to certify those ghosts are exorcised and that he is indeed the man." You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Sean Payton's fourth down gamble backfires. Could've, would've, should've. Sean Payton could sure use those 3 points about now. The Denver Broncos lost a 3-point game with a trip to Super Bowl 60 on the line, and for all the twists and turns at Empower Field on January 25th, there's no escaping the bold decision by Payton that backfired. Rather than go for a chip shot field goal that could have extended the Broncos' lead to 10-0 early in the second quarter against the New England Patriots, Payton decided to go for the mile-high jugular when facing a 4th and 1 at the 14-yard line. Oops. The naked bootleg pass from Jarrett Stidham to R.J. Harvey in the right flat came much closer to being intercepted than completed as the Patriots blew up the play with a heavy rush up the middle. "I just felt like, man, we had momentum," Payton explained in his post-game news conference. "To go up 14, I felt like we had a good call." Well, given the hindsight provided by a 10-7 loss in the AFC Championship game, turns out it was a terrible call. "We thought they were going to fake it, line up, and not hike it," Patriots defensive tackle Christian Barmore told USA Today Sports amid a festive visitors' locker room. But they didn't. They were really going for it. When they did that, they made a mistake. The moral of the story: take the points. Added Barmore, "That's their call, man. We can't control that. But when we're out there, we're doing what we've got to do." Hey, the play undoubtedly looked good enough to Payton on paper, and they were serious about running it rather than using cadence to try baiting New England into a penalty. In this day and age, it's hardly a shock when coaches pass up potential points and go for it on 4th down in the red zone. So there's that. Besides, the Broncos' defense started on such a tear that the Patriots mustered all of 12 net yards in the first quarter. All of that was included in Payton's decision-making process, but the risk, it turns out, was greater than the potential reward. Momentum? Yeah, Payton's team had it, even with Stidham, the backup quarterback, filling in for injured Bo Nix, and then squandered it. Broncos' 4th down failure changed the game's course. The 4th down call handed the momentum over to Mike Vrabel's team on a silver platter. Payton, who has 194 NFL victories on his resume, should have known better. Going up 14-zip would have been sweet, but coming away with nothing changed the course of the game. And this was before Mother Nature came blowing through in the second half with a wintry mix that changed the game's complexion. Before the Broncos had another play blown up that resulted in a turnover by Stidham that allowed the Patriots to score a quick game-tying touchdown just before halftime. Sure, there were things that were unforeseen, but with the high stakes of a Super Bowl in play, it's better to be safe than sorry. Sometimes being aggressive is a bit much. Old school philosophy would have worked. Just take the points, especially when you're already needing to reduce pressure on the backup quarterback. There will always be second thoughts, Payton said. Payton doesn't even need to see the film to realize the Broncos' offense, which lost starting running back J.K. Dobbins to a foot injury in mid-season, didn't run the ball well enough. They averaged just 3.3 yards per carry and didn't have a run longer than 9 yards, while the Patriots ran 38 times for 141 yards. There were too many drop passes, poor conditions or not, that continued a pattern evident all season. Yet the coach sounded like he will start by looking in the mirror. I'm going to look at it and be critical of myself, he said. Yes, the buck stops with Peyton. It starts with the head coach, he said. You don't know it's going to be this three-point game, but it became apparent that with each possession, a field goal, that type of thing, was going to be real important. We weren't able to get it done. That's tough in this game, especially in this game. Peyton, who has rebuilt the Broncos in 3 years, was in striking range of becoming the first coach to ever win Super Bowls with 2 different franchises. Now he's a coach who has twice suffered heartbreaking defeats in conference championship games after earning the number 1 seed in the playoffs. He will probably always wonder how this one got away. After that fateful 4th down decision, the Broncos had 8 more possessions and never advanced back to the red zone. They had 2 drives end with missed field goals and 2 drives that went 3 and out. They had the 2 Stidman turnovers, and they now have some hard knock lessons to take into a long off season. Wild off season for Stafford begins. The 2026 NFL offseason arrived sooner than the Los Angeles Rams had hoped. So too might another round of offseason drama. Just minutes after they'd left the playing surface at Lumen Field, their second excruciating defeat there to the Seattle Seahawks, setbacks that ultimately defined a season that might have been so much more for LA, the question was already surfacing. Will quarterback Matthew Stafford, the league's presumptive MVP for the 2025 season, be back in 2026? I can't generalize 6 months of my life 10 minutes after a loss, said Stafford, who passed for 374 yards, perhaps the majority of them on simply brilliant throws, and 3 touchdowns in the Rams' 31-27 loss in the NFC Championship game. It was his latest and last performance of the best season from an individual perspective of his 17-year NFL career. Appreciate the guys in this locker room a whole hell of a lot. Everybody that helped me and helped our team be as successful as we were this year, Stafford continued. And that's all I'll answer for you. A simple yes would have quashed 10 minutes and maybe at least a few months, if not 6, of what could be wild speculation about his future. But Stafford wasn't willing to give one. You'll recall we're only 11 months removed from the Rams adjusting his contract to keep him in-house in 2025. After rampant rumors regarding his status as teams like the New York Giants and Pittsburgh Steelers tried to get their hands on him. Could a similar scenario play out again? Might 10 teams line up in an attempt to recruit him in 2026, maybe more? If Stafford, who will turn 38 next month, isn't the league's best quarterback period, he was certainly its best one in 2025. He's owed $40 million in 2026, the final year of his contract. 15 peers, in so much as they share his position of Stafford's, are scheduled to average more income in 2026. A list of passers that includes Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Kirk Cousins, among others. All are younger, even Cousins, than Stafford. None are nearly as accomplished, and that was prior to the spectacular season he just completed. Rams coach Sean McVay, who admitted he thought he'd be coaching the 2025 Rams for 2 more weeks, seemed caught off guard about the question of Stafford's future. If he still wants to play, what the hell kind of question is that? Said McVay. You have to ask him. We've been totally present. I know that if he wants to, he's still playing at a pretty damn good clip. He's the MVP of the league, and if he's not, I've got respect for everybody else, but this guy played at a level that's just different. The Rams would certainly look almost unrecognizably different without Stafford, but have more than $45 in salary cap room over the cap to sweeten his deal, and maybe even add to his supporting cast ahead of next season. One of the prominent players who joined the roster last year certainly enjoyed his first close-up view of the Matthew Stafford experience. It's been a dream, said wideout Davante Adams. It's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play this game, and one of the coolest teammates I've ever had. I know I use that term with him a lot, but truly, I don't know if I've ever played with someone who's a baller and such an easy guy to function with. assuming he sticks around and doesn't create wholesale dysfunction for a franchise that otherwise would remain a Super Bowl favorite next fall. Philip Rivers pulls out of the Bills' coaching search. The Buffalo Bills made waves when they interviewed Philip Rivers for the team's head coaching job, but they will not be hiring him to replace Sean McDermott. Rivers has withdrawn from Buffalo's coaching search, according to multiple reports. NFL Media's Mike Garafolo reported the veteran quarterback enjoyed the process with Buffalo, but also noted Rivers and his family felt it isn't the right time for him to take on an NFL coaching job. Rivers' candidacy with the Bills came after he made a surprising NFL comeback at the end of the 2025 season with the Indianapolis Colts. The 44-year-old quarterback ended a retirement of nearly 5 years to try to guide the Colts to the playoffs in wake of Daniel Jones' season-ending Achilles tear. Rivers comported himself well across 3 starts, completing 63% of his passes for 544 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. However, he was unable to lead Indianapolis to a win, as the team was eliminated from postseason contention in Week 17. The veteran NFL starter doesn't have any NFL coaching experience, but spent time at St. Michael Catholic High School, a role he has held for 5 seasons since his initial retirement from the NFL. The team has posted a 43-15 record under Rivers' tutelage per MaxPreps.com. Meanwhile, the Bills will continue to search for a replacement for McDermott, one who has a bit more NFL-level coaching experience than Rivers. Bills coaching candidates. The Bills have interviewed 7 candidates for their coaching job, including Rivers, since firing McDermott after 9 seasons. A look at Buffalo's full list of coaching interviews to date. Lou Anarumo, Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator. Joe Brady, Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. Brian Daboll, former New York Giants head coach. Anthony Lynn, Commanders run game coordinator. Grant Udinski, Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver, Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. The Bills could soon add another name to their list of candidates. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported ahead of the AFC Championship game Buffalo wants to interview Denver Broncos passing game coordinator Davis Webb for their head coaching job. Webb, 31, is considered a rising star in the coaching ranks and spent the 2019-2021 seasons as a backup quarterback for the Bills. Coaches, players struggle with playing. Minneapolis shootings concern sports world. Basketball was played in Minneapolis on Sunday, January 25th, but the atmosphere surrounding Golden State's 111-85 victory over Minnesota was unlike any game those attendants ever experienced. Originally scheduled to be nationally televised on Saturday, it was postponed for 24 hours after federal agents shot and killed 37-year-old Alex Preddy earlier that morning, not far from the Timberwolves' home arena. I thought the vibe in the stands was one of the most bizarre, sad games I've ever been a part of, Warriors coach Steve Kerr said afterward. Their team, we could tell they were struggling with everything that's been going on and what the city has been through. It was very sad. It was a sad night. Before the game, Timberwolves coach Chris Finch fought through tears as he reflected on the city's second deadly interaction between agents and residents this month. As an organization, we are heartbroken for what we have to witness and endure and watch, Finch said. We just want to extend our thoughts, prayers, and concern for Mr. Preddy, his family, and all the loved ones and everyone involved in such an unconscionable situation in a community that we really love, full of people who are, by nature, peaceful and prideful. We just stand in support of our great community here. Both Finch and Kerr said as they discussed the situation with their players, and everyone agreed with the decision to postpone the game on Saturday. Emotions were still raw throughout the community as thousands of sign-carrying protesters marched in freezing conditions outside Target Center before the game, shouting, "Ice out, ice out." And inside, several members of the trampoline dunk team wore shirts that also said "Ice out" in block capital letters. I know there's a lot of heavy hearts, said Warriors star guard Stephen Curry, who scored 26 points in the win and moved into 20th place on the NBA's all-time scoring list. A lot of things, especially for this Minneapolis community Saturday, was rough. It's been rough. You can kind of feel it when we got here 2 days ago.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,